Hey guys, today I'm here with both my Mattzilla trucks. We've got the 1.9 Ultra 4 as well as the 2.2 Wraithzilla. Now this is the standard Wraithzilla. There's also the Roadster version, which basically has the top cab flipped around so that it's got a more slanted A pillar and a less slanted C pillar. But other than that, that is the only difference on the 2.2 Wraithzilla chassis. But I've got both these here, and they're very different trucks, but in some ways they still have a lot of similarities. So I wanted to kind of go over those, and if you're ever kind of hemming and hawing between which way you may want to go between these two chassis, maybe I can give you a little bit of info that may be helpful. So for right now, I'm just going to kind of go over kind of the broad generalities of these two, and then we'll get into some of the actual details. And we'll start getting in a little bit closer, and you can start seeing some of those things on the trucks and what I'm talking about. Right here is the Ultra 4 chassis. Now the Ultra 4 chassis on mine is a 1.9 truck. Now that's not to say that this couldn't be a 2.2 truck just as easy. Right now the wheelbase I've got set on here is 13 inches. So by all means that's a 2.2 size wheelbase for a lot of people. You know, 12.5 inches is a standard comp crawler wheelbase. So it does give you that option, and you could definitely put 2.2s on this and it wouldn't look out of hand or completely out of scale. So as far as that goes, this one does have that little bit of versatility there. Now the Wraithzilla chassis here is basically going to be a 2.2 truck. It would be a little bit more difficult to get this thing to scale out properly to a 1.9 based on the location of some of the shock mounts, the overall size of the chassis, and the fact that it's basically made to take a Wraith drivetrain and just swap it in here and take out your old cage. So that's really the main point of the Wraithzilla chassis. It was a very easy chassis to work with, and in general it's pretty minimal. So it's not an overly heavy chassis, which is good if you're kind of going for performance as well as the different styling, as well as the metal, the steel tube chassis, or a solid rod actually in this case. Get these two a little bit more side by side and show you some of the direct differences between them. We'll kind of just start by, I'll show you right here. Right now I've got the wheelbase of the Ultra 4 set at 13 inches. And that's long for a 1.9, but the styling of it is what I kind of like with this one. Now, the 2.2 version over here is not necessarily that much longer. It's probably closer to 14 inches, which is about where a Wraith usually sits. So an inch difference or so is about all you're going to see in wheelbase difference between these two trucks. Now, as far as actual setup, as far as axle widths, those are going to be kind of different on mine compared to what a normal setup may be, because in the Ultra 4 truck here I'm running the RC Bros Burley tubes, which gives me that XR front width, which is about 3/4 to an inch wider than a stock axle. So that's what you'll see on there. Now for crawling and things like that, that wouldn't be the best setup. This is kind of more of a go fast or G6 type setup, and it's what I actually ran it in was the G6, and it ran pretty well. So for our next comparison, I've got them stood up here in front of me. Now you will notice that they're both running an axial Wraith skid plate. That's a very easy option for a lot of reasons. As a chassis builder, it actually allows you all of your link mounts, uppers and lowers, front and rear, are all built into that skid plate. So all you have to do is come up with the side plates to mount that skid plate in there, and then come up with your shock mounts, and the rest is all how you want it to look and how strong you want it to be. So big advantage for that. Now with the 1.9 Ultra 4, I'm running a super shafty transmission in there with the 6mm extended outputs, made to replicate the output points of a Wraith transmission. So to move that output back so that you don't have drive shaft interference issues with the back of the skid plate. Now, even with that, I'm running MIP drive shafts. Now, with that position of the transmission and the length of the drive shafts, I ended up having to do a little bit of modification to a regular set of SCX10 style MIPs, because I was getting the male end was bottoming out inside of the female end during compression. So I ended up having to taper that shoulder back just a hair to be able to get that. Now that's something you could do with a grinder fairly easy. I did it on the lathe, but it wasn't that big a deal. So that's something that you could have done fairly easy with normal hand tools that you may have around the shop. But something to note, if Now there's one other major difference between these two trucks. That is how you're able to build them. The Wraithzilla, again, being built around an axial Wraith drivetrain, axial Wraith links, everything. Put it on there, whatever you're using stock, aluminum upgrades, titanium upgrades from Vanquish like I am here. Bolt it on there, bolt your axles in, and it's done. The 1.9 Ultra 4, not so much. Now, there is some off-the-shelf links that you can buy, mainly axial aluminum threaded posts and things like that, but those aren't necessarily the type of links that I like to run. I like to run a link with a larger thread so that I can run a larger rod end. So, for that reason, I ended up having to go with custom length links on this. So, if that is something that you're looking at, you need to make sure that you either have the ability to make your own links or you're willing to buy the links. For mine, I believe that I'm 4.5 inches and 4.75 inches as far as uppers and lowers. Front to rear, I'm running the same length, I believe. Now, another question I get quite often is how I finish out a truck, meaning like the panels and all those different types of things. Now, on both of these, I'm running a set of custom skins from Freaky Skins, but those are both applied to aluminum panels on both of these chassis. Now, I chose to do aluminum panels for a couple of reasons. I like the durability, and I pretty much use that on most all of my trucks. Now, the Wraithzilla is actually much easier to make panels for than the 1.9 was, because the Wraithzilla chassis is made with Wraith dimensions in mind. So basically all I had to do was take a set of Wraith side panels, put them onto a piece of aluminum and trace around them, and then cut that out. The only difference is I didn't do the V-notch that is in the door of a stock Wraith. Other than that, that's a direct replacement, and then I was able to just bolt them on. The hole locations are the only things that I needed to make sure I noted beforehand and then put on the actual aluminum panels, and didn't necessarily trust the stock Wraith panel positions. For the Ultra 4, it was actually much more difficult. What I actually did was took and stretched blue painter's tape all around the truck basically, and then trimmed it to how I wanted, took those off, applied that to my aluminum panel, and then cut that out. For aluminum, I use .025 metal aluminum sheeting, which I get in my local metal supplier that's called Metal by the Foot here. There's probably one similar in your location. The interiors of these two trucks are fairly different. Now, for the Wraithzilla, I was not able to actually use a stock Wraith interior. I looked at using it, but with how everything was going to fit, it was going to be raised up a little bit more than I would have liked. So what I actually ended up doing was basically putting a flat aluminum pan down low, but not as low as a stock Wraith interior sits. You could use a stock Wraith interior, but you're going to need to do quite a bit of trimming to get it to fit down in there and put those seats in the proper position. So what I did, again, flat pan in there, and then I put in my seats on top of that. For the seats, I used a set of seats that used to be made by Team 36. They're basically an aluminum flat fold seat with some foam on them. They're not available anymore, but I do believe there's some other types available. Now, the Ultra 4. The cockpit is different as far as this goes. How everything fits in there and everything, a big drop interior really wasn't something that I was looking at being able to do. So I went the easy route and put in a flat aluminum panel again, but much higher, just barely below the belt line, about 1/4 of an inch. And then I used an HPI Apache driver figure. Well, I only used one side. You can fit both. You just got to cut it and put them in. They come in two pieces, but you cut it down the middle and just kind of shrink them in there, and they fit just fine. I just did one just because I thought one was enough. But that is a big difference between finishing out these two trucks. Now, if you followed the two build series that I did on these as far as video series goes, you will notice there was a couple of differences between the two when I got them over just the actual difference of what chassis I got. One was the 1.9 Ultra 4 truck came in this nice black powder coat, just like you could get it from Lou. Just exactly as far as it comes to you, and it's a done truck. You bolt your stuff onto it. The Wraithzilla, I had him send raw, no coating whatsoever, and that was because I wanted to be able to do some of those additions, like some of the sheet metal work, some of the winch mounts, and different things like that. So that is a difference between those two builds. Either could have been had either way. You just have to ask Lou specifically for exactly which way you want it. Now, getting into the personal opinions between the two, that's where there's some differences, of course, especially for me. which one I like better, it's probably a hard decision. Well, it's definitely a hard decision, but I think with my gut, going with which one I like best, probably the 1.9. Now, Wraiths are probably my favorite trucks. Just kind of are. I love the axles, I love the width of them, I love the size of them, I like the size of the tires, I like their capabilities and all that. But I think I like this little 1.9 more. This little truck just works. It works well, and it just turned out to be one of my favorite little trucks. You know, the wheelbase, the width, the size. I love the suspension travel. With the 13-inch wheelbase, how I have it, I'm able to completely tuck that front servo way up in there, all the way. I built it so that it tucked almost until it touched the hood. The front axle just tucks nicely up in the chassis. I was able to keep a nice low belly height for higher speed stabilities in case I'm going to do the Ultra4 type stuff, which I do plan to do with this truck. In the rear, again, I'm able to get full suspension travel while keeping it low. Beyond that, that's really what I got for the two trucks. It's mostly going to be personal preference as far as what size and what style you like. But having both, driving both, and competing with both already, the little 1.9 has been a lot of fun. And again, it's kind of where you're running it, what you're running it in. This little 1.9 wouldn't have stood up to the 2.2 TTC that I was in with this truck. So, you know, having both is a huge advantage, but not always something that everyone's going to be able to do. So that's all I got for now, guys. Hopefully that helped out a couple of you. Maybe if you're looking between trying to buy one of these two chassis and you can't quite make up your mind. But that's my personal opinion, and hopefully it was helpful, and we'll see you guys next time.